For today's video, please make sure that you're seated and you've taken all your heart medications and that your poor keyboard is in a safe place and not in harm's way of your rage. Because today I'm going to do something very dangerous because, well, I tend to be somewhat of a daredevil, but I went on eBay just kind of shopping around and I decided to do something that probably isn't very healthy for people in general, but I decided to sort the listings from most expensive to least expensive, and I realized that there are some McFarlane figures out there that you would probably have to sell a kidney for. Well, not really, because kidneys go for a little bit more, I'd like to think, but there have been some McFarlane figures that have gained value over the past couple of years, and I wanted to kind of study that and dissect it a little bit more. So today we're going to be doing the top 5 most expensive McFarlane action figures. And as I said, I'm going to use eBay as a basis. I know that there are a few other third-party sellers or third-party marketplaces like Amazon and a few others, but I decided to just base myself off of eBay. And most of these have multiple listings, so it's not like I just went off of one listing that just sold something for ridiculous amounts. This has been a consistent trend for all of these figures. I was just very curious to see what figures have gone up in value and maybe which ones have dropped or just have stayed stagnant. So as I mentioned, this is going to be the top 5 most expensive McFarlane figures online as of today. Let me know in the comment section if you have any of these, or do you regret not picking up any of these, because I know there are a couple at least on this particular list that I missed out on or maybe saw but didn't really think too much of them. So let's get straight into it. As always, if you guys enjoy the content, hit the like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let's get straight into number 5, where we have Owlman from the Crime Syndicate. This was supposed to be one of those waves that had a figure released every month or so, and every single month you would get a new figure along with a Build-A-Figure piece. It would take, I believe, about like 4 months to complete the entire Connect and Build-A-Figure. For this particular wave, you are going to be able to build Starl. This is definitely a character that has a very small cult following, so it made perfect sense for them to include him in this type of wave. It would force all of the collectors to try to, especially if you were a big comic book fan, and obviously Starl had just made his live action debut in the newest Suicide Squad film from James Gunn, so it made perfect sense for him to release Owlman in this particular wave. I will say this is definitely going to be one of those figures that as a collector we're going to be kicking ourselves for, because this was a figure that not only was readily available, but I do remember it actually going down on clearance. I remember seeing it for probably about like $14 to $15 at my local Target. So this was a very obtainable figure. We see a lot of the listings nowadays going for, roughly, including shipping and taxes, probably about like $90 to $100. But we have seen sales go even higher than that, like in the low 100s, 110, 120-ish. So it's definitely a figure that has continued to stay strong. It has dipped a little bit. Now you see like listings for, high 70s plus shipping, so roughly about like high 80s to $90, but it's still a very strong figure. Like I said, the character definitely has a cult following, and the fans have made this one of the top 5 most expensive figures from the McFarlane line so far. The number 4 spot is actually a Connect and Build-A-Figure from McFarlane, and it's directly tied to Owlman. We're talking about the Starl action figure. I'm not sure if you could even call it an action figure. I don't believe it has any articulation. This definitely was a figure that I was very interested upon its first announcement. However, I just personally didn't really have the patience to wait a month for each figure to be released. It made really no sense for me personally, but this is definitely one of the best DC multiverse villains out there. It has really good size, great sculpting overall. Now the price really does depend on the seller, the ratings, how fast they ship this, but it seems that it's pretty consistently at roughly about $90, including shipping and the actual price for the item. It has popped up here and there depending, I'm assuming, on the popularity of the character. As I mentioned, he did make his live action debut, and I think that really brought a ton of attention to the character for those people that maybe aren't too familiar with his origin story in the comic books. And to be brutally honest, I am a little bit shocked at how much this figure is worth, just because there are other Connect and Build-A-Figures that aren't even anywhere near this price range. Solomon Grundy is a perfect example of that, where you can get him for as as low as about like $60 to $70 with free shipping. Regardless, it is definitely one of the most interesting comic book villains in the DC universe, and if you're really interested in this character, I definitely suggest you pick it up before for any reason it spikes back up again. Our third spot on today's list is definitely another very interesting entry, primarily because the source material was kind of panned. A lot of people criticized Justice League, and I'll include myself in that. Yes, I did enjoy the Snyder Cut slightly more than the original one, but that's not really saying much. Honestly, I'm not quite sure why this particular figure popped the way that it did. Obviously, it was a Target exclusive, which made it a little bit more difficult to find, but it wasn't impossible to find in store either. It was also very interesting that McFarlane decided to make the black suit the wide release version of the action figure, and then the black and red classic colors were only exclusive to Target. Like I said, very interesting move from McFarlane. Regardless, the fan base has spoken, and really that entire wave has become extremely sought after and very expensive. Not to mention, it seems like Henry Cavill's time as Superman has come to an end, unfortunately, which I believe will only continue to add to its value in the long run. The figure has been strongly going for over $100, including shipping. In some cases, it has dropped just under the $100 mark, but in most cases, you're going to be looking to pay anywhere from about $110 to about $120, including everything. In case you just want a Henry Cavill action figure, you don't need to go out of your way to look for this one. There's also the black suit version, which is much easier to obtain and much more affordable if you're just looking for a stand-in in your Justice League display. But as I mentioned, if you want those classic red blue colors, it's definitely going to cost you. The second spot on today's list honestly shouldn't surprise anybody. We're talking about Red Hood, which is one of the originals that McFarlane released. This is one of the first few waves that he curated, and even though he did release an alternate version that was exclusive to Walmart, which featured an unmasked version of Red Hood, it was the exact same figure except it had a Jason Todd head sculpt. That particular version never really gained that much value. You could still find him for just about $30 in a third market setting, but again, the original one with the red mask is definitely a lot more expensive. You're looking at least $120 through eBay or through any other third-party sellers. You're definitely going to be paying over $100, and there have been times where it spikes a little bit higher. It's also insane to think that this particular version of Red Hood has gone up so much in price, and yet there are other iterations of this character that haven't really seen too much of a price hike. For example, both of the video games, whether it was the Gotham Knights version or the Arkham Asylum version or even the Three Jokers iteration, none of those have really skyrocketed too much in price. They're still relatively affordable online, so I'm assuming it's that whole rebirth era that people are going crazy for. And let's also not forget, this is one of the few figures that McFarlane released with actual guns included in the packaging. It's something that he had to go away from later down the road, and eventually he had to make his own McFarlane action figure weapons. Let me know down in the comment section below which is your favorite Red Hood so far. I'm very curious to see everybody's response. Now let's get straight up into number one, where we have this giant behemoth of an action figure. We're talking about Bane, and at first glance this definitely has a lot of comic book vibes. They could have easily gone with a Bane that maybe is based on a video game, which is something that we've seen consistently. For example, Killer Croc and Titan Joker. But they decided to go definitely with a much more comic book style, which the fans obviously enjoyed way more than any other version that they could have received. It was also perfect timing because McFarlane just recently released the Nightfall Batman, which goes perfectly with this particular Bane. And for those people that are desperately looking for a Bane action figure, I would say be very patient, because there's a strong possibility that McFarlane decides to do a 2-pack with this particular Bane and maybe a slightly tweaked Nightfall Batman. However, if you want that exact version of Bane, you're going to have to shell out about $200 for this figure. Granted, there are some buy it now listings that are going for roughly about $180, but there are a few sold listings that went for $200, which is honestly mind-boggling. But as I mentioned earlier, for those people that are patient, I think they definitely will be rewarded by McFarlane, because he will find a way to reuse this particular body mold, whether that's some sort of platinum edition or whether it's a repaint or maybe be a brand new head sculpt and maybe he labels it a video game version. We just don't know, but I do feel like we'll eventually get at least a different version of Bane, but it will be a Bane nonetheless. So there you guys have it, a quick little top 5 list where we studied basically the most expensive McFarlane action figures from the DC Multiverse line, that is. Granted, I did leave some like SDCC exclusive stuff and some vehicles off of the list, but that's our list for today. Let me know in the comment section if you guys have picked up any of these. Do you guys plan on picking up any, or do you guys plan on just waiting for, you know, some future release or some future repaint that we might receive from McFarlane? So let me know down in the comment section. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.